Okay, let's at least get to part 2. Actually, fuck it. Hold on. Fan. Guys, probably leave it. Turn that off. Right. Chapter 6. What caused it? Was it the late night drinking and talking, or did it have to do with my mother and her saying she was going to die? Did the wolves have something to do with it? Was it a spell cast upon the imagination by the witch's place? I don't know. It had come like something visited upon me from outside. One minute it was an idea, and the next it was real. I think you can invite that sort of thing, but you can't make it come. Of course it was slacking, but the sky was never quite the same shade of blue again. I mean, the world looked different forever after, and even in moments of exquisite happiness there was the darkness lurking, the sense of our frailty and our hopelessness. Maybe it was a presentiment, but I don't think so. It was more important than that, and frankly, I don't believe in presentiments. But to return to the story, during all this misery I kept away from my mother. I wasn't going to say those monstrous things about death and chaos to her. But she heard from everyone else, and that I'd lost my reason. And finally, on the first Sunday night of Lent, she came to me. I was alone in my room, and the whole household had gone down to the village at twilight for the big bonfire that was the custom every year on this evening. I had always hated the celebration. It had a ghastly aspect to it. The roaring flames, the dancing and singing, the peasants going afterwards through the orchards with their torches to the tune of their strange chanting. We had a priest for a little while who called it pagan, but they got rid of him fast enough. The farmers of our mountains kept to their old rituals. It was to make the trees bear and the crops grow, all this. And on this occasion, more than any other, I felt I saw the kind of men and women who could burn witches. In my present frame of mind, it struck terror. I sat by my own little fire, trying to resist the urge to go to the window and look down on the big fire that drew me as strongly as it scared me. My mother came in, closed the door behind her, and told me that she must talk to me. Her whole manner was tenderness. "Is it on account of my dying? What's come over you?" she asked. "Tell me if it is, and put your hands in mine." She even kissed me. She was frail in her faded dressing gown, and her hair was undone. I couldn't stand to see the streaks of gray in it. She looked starved. But I told her the truth. I don't know, and then I didn't know, and then I explained some of what had happened in the inn. I tried not to convey the horror of it, the strange logic of it. I tried not to make it so absolute. She listened, and then she said, "You're such a fighter, my son. You never accept. Not even when it's the fate of all mankind will you accept it." "I can't," I said miserably. "I love you for it," she said. It's all too like you that you should see this in a tiny bedroom in the inn late at night when you're drinking wine. And it's entirely like you to rage against it the way you rage against everything else. I started to cry again, though I knew she wasn't condemning me. And then she took out her handkerchief and opened it to reveal several gold coins. "You'll get over this," she said. "For the moment, death is spoiling life for you. That's all. But life is more important than death. You'll realize it soon enough. Now listen to what I have to say. I've had the doctor here and the old woman in the village who knows more about healing than he knows. Both agree with me I won't live too long." "Stop, Mother," I said, aware of how selfish I was being, but unable to hold back. "And this time there'll be no gifts. Put the money away." "Sit down," she said. She pointed to the bench near the hearth. Reluctantly, I did as I was told. She sat beside me. "I know," she said, "that you and Nicholas are talking of running away." "I won't go, Mother." "What, until I'm dead?" I didn't answer her. I can't convey to you the frame of mind. I was still raw, trembling, and we had to talk about the fact that this living, breathing woman was going to stop living and breathing and start to putrefy and rot away, that her soul would spin into an abyss, that everything she had suffered in life, including the end of it, would come to nothing at all. Her little face was like something painted on a veil, and from the distant village came the thinnest sound of the singing villagers. "I want you to go to Paris, Lestat," she said. "I want you to take this money, which is all I have left from my family. I want you to know you're in Paris, Lestat, when my time comes. I want to die knowing that you were in Paris." I was startled. I remembered her stricken expression years ago, when they'd brought me back from the Italian troop. I looked at her for a long moment. She sounded almost angry in her persuasiveness. "I'm terrified of dying," she said. Her voice went almost dry. "And I swear I will go mad if I don't know you're in Paris and you're free when it finally comes." I questioned her with my eyes. I was asking her with my eyes, "Do you really mean this?" "I've kept you here as surely as your father has," she said. "Not on account of pride, but on account of selfishness. And now I'm going to atone for it. I'll see you go. And I don't care what you do when you reach Paris, whether you sing while Nicholas plays the violin or turn somersault on the stage at the Saint Germain at the Saint Germain Fair. But go, and do what you do as best you can." I tried to take her in my arms. She stiffened at first, but then I felt her weaken and she melted against me. And she gave herself over so completely to me in that moment that I think I understood why she had always been so restrained. She cried, which I'd never heard her do. And I loved this moment for all its pain. I was ashamed of loving it, but I wouldn't let her go. I held her tightly and maybe kissed her for all the times she had never let me do it. We seemed for the moment like two parts of the same thing. And then she grew calm. She seemed to settle into herself, and slowly but very firmly she released me and pushed me away. She talked for a long time. She said things I didn't understand, then about how when she would see me riding out to hunt, she felt some wondrous pleasure in it. And she felt that same pleasure when I angered everyone and thundered my questions at my father and brothers as to why we had to live the way we lived. She spoke in an almost eerie way of my being a secret part of her anatomy, of my being the organ for which women do not really have. "You are the man in me," she said, and so I've kept you here, afraid of living without you, and maybe now in sending you away, I'm only doing what I have done before." She shocked me a little. I never thought a woman could feel or articulate anything quite like this. "Nicholas's father knows about your plans." "Oh, sorry." "Nicholas's father knows about your plans," she said. "The innkeeper overheard you. It's important you leave right away. Take the diligence at dawn, and write to me as soon as you reach Paris. There are letter writers at the cemetery of Les Innocents near the Saint Germain market. Find one who can write Italian for you, and then no one will be able to read the letter but me." When she left the room, I didn't quite believe what had happened. For a long moment I stood staring before me. I stared at my bed, with its mattress of straw, at the 2 coats I owned and the red cloak, and my 1 pair of leather shoes by the hearth. I stared out the narrow slit of a window at the black hulk of the mountains I'd known all my life. The darkness, the gloom, slid back from me for a precious moment. And then I was rushing down the stairs and down the mountains to the village to find Nicholas and to tell him we were going to Paris. We were going to do it. Nothing could stop us this time. He was with his family watching the bonfire, and as soon as he saw me, he threw his arm around my neck, and I hooked my arm around his waist, and I dragged him away from the crowds and the blaze, and towards the end of the meadow. The air smelled fresh and green as it does only in spring. The air smelled... Even the villagers singing didn't sound so horrible. I started dancing around in a circle. "Get your violin," I said. "Play a song about going to Paris. We're on our way. We're going in the morning." "And how are we going to feed ourselves in Paris?" he sang out, as he made with his empty hands to play an invisible violin. "Are you going to shoot rats for our supper?" Don't ask what we'll do when we... Don't ask what we'll do when we get there," I said. "The important thing is to just get there." Chapter 7. Not even a fortnight passed before I stood in the midst of the noonday crowds in the vast public cemetery of La Innocence. With its old vaults and stinking open graves, the most fantastical marketplace I had ever beheld, and, amid the stench and the noise, bent over an Italian letter-writer dictating my first letter to my mother. Yes, we had arrived safely after traveling day and night, and we had rooms in the Ile de la Cité, and we were inexpressibly happy, and Paris was warm and beautiful and magnificent beyond all imagining. I wish I could have taken the pen myself and written to her. I wish I could have told her what it was like, seeing these towering mansions, ancient winding streets, a swarm with beggars, peddlers, noblemen, houses of 4 and 5 stories banking the crowded boulevards. I wished I could have described the carriages to her, the rumbling confections of gilt and glass bullying their way over the Pont Neuf and the Pont Notre Dame, streaming past the Louvre, the Palais Royal. I wish I could describe the people, the gentlemen with their clocked stockings and silver walking sticks, tripping through the mud in pastel slippers, the ladies with their pearl-encrusted wigs and swaying panniers of silk and muslin, my first certain glimpse of Queen Marie Antoinette herself walking boldly through the gardens of the Tuileries. Of course she'd seen it in all years and years before I was even born. She lived in Naples and London and Rome with her father, but I wanted to tell her what she had given to me, how it was to hear the choir in Notre Dame, to push into the jam-packed cafes with Nicholas, talk with his old student cronies over English coffee, what it was like to get dressed up in Nicholas's fine clothes, he made me do it, and stand below the footlights and the Comédie Française, gazing up in adoration at the actors on the stage. But all I wrote in this first letter was perhaps the very best of it. The address of the garret rooms we called our home in the Ile de la Cité, and the news. I have been hired in a real theatre to study as an actor with a fine prospect of performing very soon. What I didn't tell her was that we had to walk up 6 flights of stairs to our rooms, that men and women brawled and screamed in the alleyways beneath our windows, that we had run out of money already, thanks to my dragging us to every opera, ballet, and drama in town, and that the establishment where I worked was a shabby little boulevard theatre, one step up from a platform at the fair, and my jobs were to help the players dress, sell tickets, sweep up, and throw out the troublemakers. But I was in paradise again, and so was Nicholas, though no decent orchestra in the city would hire him, and he was now playing solos with the little bunch of musicians in the theatre where I worked, and when we were really pinched, he did play right on the boulevard, with me beside him holding out the hat. We were shameless. We ran up the steps each night with our bottle of cheap wine and a loaf of fine sweet Parisian bread, which was ambrosia after we had eaten in the Auvergne. I'm sorry, I cannot pronounce this given French word to save my fucking life. Anyways, and in the light of our own tallow candle, the garret was the most glorious place I'd ever inhabited. As I mentioned before, I'd seldom been in a little wooden room except in the inn. Well, this room had plaster walls and a plaster ceiling. It was really Paris. It had polished wood flooring and even a tiny little fireplace with a new chimney, which actually made a draught. So what if we had to sleep on lumpy pallets and the neighbors woke us up fighting? We were walking up in Paris. We were waking up in Paris, and could roam arm in arm for hours through streets and alleyways, peering into shops full of jewelry and plate, tapestries and statues, wealth such as I'd never seen. Even the reeking meat markets delighted me. The crash and clatter of the city, the tireless busyness of its thousands upon thousands of laborers, clerks, craftsmen, the comings and goings of an endless multitude. By day I almost forgot the vision of the inn, and the darkness, unless of course I glimpsed some uncollected corpse in a filthy alleyway, of which there were many, or I'd happen upon a public execution in the Place de Grève. And I was always happening upon a public execution in the Place de Grève. I'd wander out of the square shuddering, almost moaning. I could become obsessed with it if not distracted, but Nicholas was adamant. Lestat, no talk of the eternal, the immutable, the unknowable. He threatened to hit me or shake me if I should start. And when twilight came on, the time I hated more than ever, whether I had seen an execution or not, whether the day had been glorious or vexing, the trembling would start in me. And only one thing saved me from it, the warmth and excitement of the brightly lighted theater, and I made sure that before dusk I was safely inside. Now, in the Paris of those times, the theaters of the boulevards weren't even legitimate houses at all. Only the Comédie Française, or Francois, I can't quite tell if that's... anyways. And the Théâtre des Italiens were government-sanctioned theaters, and to them all serious drama belonged. This included tragedy as well as comedy, the plays of Racine, Corneille, the brilliant Voltaire, but the old Italian commedia that I loved, Pantaloon, Harlequin, Scaramouche, and the rest, lived on as they always had, with tightrope walkers, acrobats, jugglers, and puppeteers, and the platform spectacles at the Saint-Germain and the Saint-Laurent fairs. And the boulevard theaters had grown out of these fairs. By my time, the last decades of the 18th century, they were permanent establishments along the Boulevard du Temple, and though they played to the poor who couldn't afford the grand houses, they also collected a very well-to-do crowd. Plenty of the aristocracy of the rich bourgeoisie crowded into the lodges, to see the boulevard performances, because they were lively and full of good talent, and not so stiff as the plays of the great Racine or the great Voltaire. We did the Italian comedy just as I'd learned it before, full of improvisations, that every night it was new, different, yet always the same. And we also did singing, and all kinds of nonsense, not just because the people loved it, but because we had to. We couldn't be accused of breaking the monopoly of the state theaters on straight plays. The house itself was a rickety wooden rat trap, seating no more than 300, but its little stage and props were elegant, and it had a luxurious blue velvet stage curtain, and its private boxes had screens. And its actors and actresses were seasoned and truly talented, or so it seemed to me. Even if I hadn't had this newly acquired dread of the dark, this malady of morality, as Nicholas persisted in calling it, it couldn't have been more exciting to go through the stage door. For 5 to 6 hours every evening, I lived and breathed in a little universe of shouting and laughing and quarreling men and women, struggling for this one and against that one, all of us comrades in the wings, even if we weren't friends. Maybe it was like being in a little boat on the ocean, all of us pulling together, unable to escape each other. It was divine. Nicholas was slightly less enthusiastic, but then that was to be expected. And he got even more ironical when his rich student friends came around to talk to him. They thought he was a lunatic to live as he did, and for me, a nobleman shoveling actresses into their costumes and emptying slop buckets, they had no words at all. Of course, all that these young bourgeois really wanted was to be aristocrats. They bought titles, married into aristocratic families whenever they could. And it's one of the little jokes of history that they got mixed up in the revolution and helped to abolish the class, which in fact they really wanted to join. I didn't care if we ever saw Nicholas's friends again. The actors didn't know about my family, and in favor of the very simple Lestat de Voilet, or I guess you could say de Voila. Actually, no, it would be de Voila. Yeah, de Voila. which meant nothing, actually. I dropped my real name, de Liancourt. I was learning everything I could about the stage. I memorized, I mimicked, I asked endless questions, and only stopped my education long enough each night for that moment when Nicholas played his solo on the violin. He'd rise from his seat in the tiny orchestra, the spotlight would pick him out from the others, and he would rip into a little sonata, sweet enough and just short enough to bring down the house. And all the while I dreamed of my own moment, when the old actors whom I studied and pestered and imitated and waited upon like a lackey would finally say, "All right, Lestat, tonight we need you as as Lelio. Now you ought to know what to do." It came in late August at last. Paris was at its warmest, and the nights were almost balmy, and the house was full of a restless audience fanning itself with handkerchiefs and handbills. The thick white paint was melting on my face as I put it on. I wore a pasteboard sword and Nicholas's best velvet coat. Oh shit, I lost my plane. Yeah, and I was trembling before I stepped on the stage, thinking, this is like waiting to be executed or something. But as soon as I stepped out there, I turned and looked directly into the jam-packed hall, and the strangest thing happened. The fear evaporated. I beamed at the audience, and very slowly I bowed. I stared at the lovely Flaminia, as if I were seeing her for the first time. I had to win her. The romp began. The stage belonged to me as it had years and years ago in the far-off country town. And as we pranced madly together across the boards, quarreling, embracing, clowning, laughter rocked the house. I could feel the attention as if it were an embrace. Each gesture, each line brought a roar from the audience. It was too easy, almost, and we could have worked it for another half hour if the other actors, eager to get into the next trick, as they called it, hadn't forced us finally towards the wings. The crowd was standing up to applaud us, and it wasn't that country audience under the open sky. These were Parisians, shouting for Lelio and Flaminia to come back out. In the shadows of the wings, I reeled. I almost collapsed. I could not see anything for the moment but the vision of the audience gazing up at me over the footlights. I wanted to go right back on stage. I grabbed Flaminia and kissed her and realized that she was kissing me back passionately. Then Renaud, the old manager, pulled her away. "All right, Lestat," he said, as if he were cross about something. "All right, you've done tolerably well. I'm going to let you go on regularly from now on." But before I could start jumping up and down for joy, half the troupe materialized around us, and Lucina, one of the actresses, immediately spoke up. "Oh no, you'll not let him go on regularly," she said. "He's the handsomest actor on the Boulevard du Temple. And you'll hire him outright for it, and pay him outright for it, and he doesn't touch another broom or mop." I was terrified. My career had just started, and it was about to be over, but to my amazement, Renaud agreed to all her terms. Of course I was very flattered to be called handsome, and I understood I had years ago that Lelio, the lover, is supposed to have considerable style. An aristocrat with any breeding whatsoever was perfect for the part. But if I was going to make the Paris audiences really notice me, if I was going to have them talking about me at the Comédie Française, I had to be more than some yellow-haired angel fallen out of a marquise family onto the stage. I had to be a great actor, and that is exactly what I determined to be. That night, Nicholas and I celebrated with a colossal drunk. We had all the troupe up to our rooms for it, and I climbed out of the slippery rooftops and opened my arms to Paris, and Nicholas played his violin in the window until we'd awakened the whole neighborhood. The music was rapturous, yet people were snarling and screaming up the alleyways, and banging on pots and pans. We paid no attention. We were dancing and singing as we had in the witch's place. I almost fell off the window ledge. The next day, bottle in hand, I dictated the whole story to the Italian letter writer in the stinking sunshine and lay on innocence, and saw that the letter went off to my mother at once. I wanted to embrace everybody I saw in the streets. I was Lelio. I was an actor. By September, I had my name on the handbills, and I sent those to my mother, too. And we weren't doing the old commedia. We were performing a farce by a famous writer who, on account of a general playwright strike, couldn't get it performed at the Comédie Française. Of course, we couldn't say his name, but everyone knew it was his work, and half the court was packing Renaud's house of thespians every night. I wasn't the lead, but I was the young lover, a sort of Lelio again, really, which was almost better than the lead, and I stole every scene in which I appeared. Nicholas had taught me the part, bawling me out constantly for not learning to read, and by the fourth performance the playwright had written extra lines for me. Nicky was having his own movement at the intermezzo. Or no, it would be intermezzo. My apologies. When his latest rendering of a frothy little Mozart sonata was keeping the house in its seats. Even his student friends were back. We were getting invitations to private balls. I went tearing off to Le Innocence every few days to write to my mother. And finally, I had a clipping from an English paper, The Spectator, to send her, which praised our little play, and in particular the blonde-haired rogue who steals the hearts of the ladies in the third and fourth acts. Of course, I couldn't read this clipping, but the gentleman who'd brought it to me said it was complimentary, and Nicholas swore it was too. When the first chill nights of fall came on, I wore the fur-lined red cloak on the stage. You could have seen it in the back row of the gallery, even if you were almost blind. I had more skill now with the white makeup, shading it here and there to heighten the contours of my face, and though my eyes were ringed in black and my lips reddened a little, I looked both startling and human at the same time. I got love notes from the women in the crowd. Nicholas was studying music in the mornings with an Italian maestro. Yet we had money enough for good food, wood, and coal. My mother's letters came twice a week and said her health had taken a turn for the better. She wasn't coughing as badly as last winter. She wasn't in pain. But our fathers had disowned us and would not acknowledge any mention of our names. We were too happy to worry about that, but the dark dread, the malady of morality, was with me a lot when the cold weather came on. The cold seemed worse in Paris. It wasn't clean as it had been in the mountains. The poor hovered in doorways, shivering and hungry. The crooked, unpaved streets were thick with filthy slush. I saw barefoot children suffering before my very eyes, and more neglected corpses lying about than ever before. I was never so glad of the fur-lined cape as I was then. I wrapped it around Nicholas and held him close to me when we went out together, and we walked in a tight embrace through the snow and the rain. Cold or no cold, I can't exaggerate the happiness of these days. Life was exactly what I thought it could be. And I knew I wouldn't be long in a Renaissance theater. Everybody was saying so. I had visions of the big stages, of touring London and Italy and even America with a great troupe of actors. Yet there was no reason to hurry. My cup was full. Chapter 8. But in the month of October, when Paris was already freezing, I commenced to see, quite regularly, a strange face in the audience that invariably distracted me. Sometimes it almost made me forget what I was doing, this face, and then it would be gone, as if I'd imagined it. I must have seen it off and on for a fortnight before I finally mentioned it to Nicky. I felt foolish and found it hard to put into words. "There is someone out there watching me," I said. "Everyone's watching you," Nicky said. "That's what you want." He was feeling a little sad that evening, and his answer was slightly sharp. Earlier, when he was making the fire, he said he would never amount to much without the violin. In spite of his ear and his skill, there was too much he didn't know, and I would be a great actor, he was sure. I had said this was nonsense, but it was a shadow falling over my soul. I remembered my mother telling me that it was too late for him. He wasn't envious, he said. He was just unhappy a little, that's all. I decided to drop the matter of the mysterious face. I tried to think of some way to encourage him. I reminded him that his playing produced profound emotions in people, that even the actors backstage stopped to listen when he played. He had an undeniable talent. "But I want to be a great violinist," he said, "and I'm afraid it will never be. As long as we are at home, I could pretend that it was going to be." "You can't give up on it," I said. "Lestat, let me be frank with you," he said. "Things are easy for you. When you set your sights on it, you get for yourself." Oh, no. Oh, no, sorry. "When you set your sights on, you get for yourself. I know what you're thinking about all the years you were miserable at home. But even then, what you really set your mind to, you accomplished. And we left for Paris the very day that you decided to do it. You don't regret coming to Paris, do you? I asked. Of course not. I simply mean that you think things are possible which aren't possible. At least not for the rest of us. Like killing the wolves. A coldness passed over me when he said this, and for some reason I thought of that mysterious face again in the audience, the one watching. Something to do with the wolves. Something to do with the sentiments Nikki was expressing. Didn't make sense. I tried to shrug it off. If you'd set out to play the violin, you'd probably be playing for the court by now, he said. Sorry. If you'd set out to play the violin, you'd probably be playing for the court by now, he said. Nikki, this kind of talk is poison, I said under my breath. You can't do anything but try to get what you want. You knew the odds were against you when you started. There isn't anything else except... I know, he smiled. Except the meaninglessness. Death. Yes, I said. All you can do is make your life have meaning. Make it good. Oh, not goodness again, he said. You and your malady of morality, and your malady of goodness. He had been looking at the fire, and he turned to me with a deliberately scornful expression. We're a pack of actors and entertainers who can't even be buried in consecrated ground. We're outcasts. God, if you could only believe in it, I said. That we do good when we make others forget their sorrow. Make them forget for a little while that... What? That they're going to die? He smiled in a particularly vicious way. Lestat, I thought all this would change when... Lestat, I thought all this would change with you when we got to Paris. That was foolish of you, Nick, I answered. He was making me angry now. I do good in the Boulevard du Temple. I feel it. I stopped because I saw the mysterious face again, and a dark feeling had passed over me. Something of foreboding. Why, hello there. I'm in the middle of Chapter 8. We're almost done with Part 1. Hey, Windu.
Hi.
Yo. What's up with the audio?
I don't know.
Damn. You sound a bit tired. You good?
Yeah, I just got out of work. How many parts we got?
We're still on Part 1. I'm about to finish up Part 1 to get to Part 2. We just have this one chapter and we'll start it. Okay. You only missed a couple chapters, but it's not really much. Lestat and Nicholas are in Paris with his with Lestat's mother's blessing, and actually a little bit you missed. It seems that her health has improved somewhat, despite it being winter, which is interesting because she said she wouldn't survive the winter. Granted, I do know what happens to her, but it is interesting that they hint at this, like at this point. That is interesting. I believe they're going to come back and, they're going to add to that later. Like, that'll become relevant. But for now, I'll just continue with Chapter 8. As Lestat and his... Yeah. Well, I think it's more like she was encouraged and is happy that Lestat is in Paris. Like, she doesn't care that she's going to die. She's happy that he's in Paris. Like, it's like a part of herself she's setting free. She actually described it as, like, you're like an organ of me, like, living. Even he found it a bit weird. Yeah. Like, I think it was meant to be, like, she's being poetic and saying, like, you're like a physical part of myself. And so long as you live on, I will too. I guess. But she basically told him, like, no, you take this bit of money, you go to Paris, you work for your dream, baby. I'll be fine. Just send letters in Italian so that way I can read them and nobody else can, and we'll be good. Alright? Like, basically, that was the agreement. Oh my god. Oh my god. Hello. We're almost done with Part 1 of the book. I'm on the last chapter before we start Part 2 of, like, 7 or 8. What's that? I didn't quite hear you.
You're talking to somebody else.
Oh, my apologies. Okay.
No, I have that unlocked this morning.
Oh, Okay. Okay, I'll finish up this chapter and I'll talk about at least part 2, because that's going to be interesting. Okay. Because we... Actually, no, I think we're only really starting chapter 8. Yeah, anyway. Okay. Let me find my part. Okay. Lestat is currently having an argument with his boy, Nicky. Yes, he spelt it Nicki. Yeah, they fucking... No, it is not. Okay. I'll restart with the paragraph I just saw. I stopped because I saw the mysterious face again, and a dark feeling had passed over me. Something of foreboding. Yet, even that startling face was usually smiling. That was the odd thing. Yes, smiling, enjoying. Lestat, I love you, Nick said gravely. At least he admitted. I love you as I have loved few people in my life. But in a real way, you're a fool with all your ideas about goodness. I laughed. Nicholas, I said, I can live without God. I can even come to live with the idea there is no life after. But I do not think I could go on if I did not believe in the possibility of goodness. Instead of mocking me for once, why don't you tell me what you believe? As I see it, he said, there's weakness and there's strength, and there is good art and bad art. And that is what I believe in. At the moment we are engaged in making what is rather bad art and has nothing to do with goodness. Our conversation could have turned into a full-scale fight here if I had said all that was on my mind about bourgeois pomposity. For I fully believe that our work at Renaud's was in many ways finer than what I saw at the grand theaters. Only the framework was less impressive. Excuse me, please. Why couldn't a bourgeois gentleman forget about the frame? How could he be made to look at something other than the surface? I took a deep breath. If goodness does exist, he said, then I'm the opposite of it. I'm evil and I revel in it. I thumb my nose at goodness. And if you must know, I don't play the violin for the idiots who come to Renaud's to make them happy. I play it for me, for Nicholas. I didn't want to hear any more. It was time to go to bed. But I was bruised by this little talk, and he knew it. And as I started to pull off my boots, he got up from the chair and came and sat next to me. I'm sorry, he said in the most broken voice. It was so changed from the posture of a minute ago that I looked up at him, and he was so young and so miserable that I couldn't help putting my arm around him and telling him that he must not worry about it anymore. You have a radiance in you, Lestat, he said, and it draws everyone to you. It's there even when you're angry or discouraged. Poetry, I said. We're both tired. No, it's true, he said. You have a light in you that's almost blinding. But in me there's only darkness. Sometimes I think it's like the darkness that infected you that night in the inn when you began to cry and to tremble. You were so helpless, so unprepared for it. I try to keep the darkness from you because I need your light. I need it desperately, but you don't need the darkness. You're the mad one, I said. If you could see yourself, hear your own voice, your music, which of course you play for yourself, you wouldn't see darkness, Nicky. You'd see an illumination that is all your own. Songbird, yes, but light and beauty come together in you in 1,000 different patterns. The next night the performance went especially well. The audience was a lively one, inspiring all of us to extra tricks. I did some new dance steps that were for some reason never proved interesting in private rehearsal, but worked miraculously on the stage. And Nicky was extraordinary with the violin, playing one of his own compositions. But towards the end of the evening I glimpsed the mysterious face again. It jarred me worse than it ever had, and I almost lost the rhythm of my song. In fact, it seemed my head for a moment was swimming. When Nicky and I were alone, I had to talk about it, about the particular sensation that I had fallen asleep on the stage and had been dreaming. We sat by the hearth together with our wine on the top of the little barrel, and in the firelight Nicky looked as weary and dejected as he had the night before. I didn't want to trouble him, but I couldn't forget about the face. Well, what does he look like? Nicholas asked. He was warming his hands, and over his shoulder I saw through the window a city of snow-covered rooftops that made me feel more cold. I didn't like this conversation. That's the worst part of it, I said. All I see is his face. He must be wearing something black, a cloak and even a hood. But it looks like a mask to me, the face, very white and strangely clear. I mean, the lines in his face are so deep, they seem to be etched with black grease paint. I see it for a moment. It veritably glows. Then when I look again, there's no one there. Yet, this is an exaggeration. It's more subtle than that, the way he looks, and yet... The description seemed to disturb Nicky as much as it disturbed me. He didn't say anything, but his face softened somewhat, as if he were forgetting his sadness. "Well, I don't want to get your hopes up," he said. He was very kind and sincere now. "But maybe it is a mask you're seeing, and maybe it's someone from the Comédie Française come to see you perform." I shook my head. "I wish it was, but no one would wear a mask like that. And I'll tell you something else, too." He waited, but I could see I was passing on to him some of my own apprehension. He reached over and took the wine bottle by the neck and poured a little in my glass. "Whoever he is," I said, "he knows about the wolves." "He what?" "He knows about the wolves." I was very unsure of myself. It was like recounting a dream I had all but forgotten. "He knows I killed the wolves back home. He knows the cloak I wear is lined with their fur." "What are you talking about? You mean you've spoken to him?" "No, that's just it," I said. This was so confusing to me, so vague. I felt that swimming sensation again. "That's what I'm trying to tell you. I've never spoken to him, never been near him, but he knows." "Ah, Lestat," he said. He sat back on the bench. He was smiling at me in the most endearing way. "Next you'll be seeing ghosts. You have the strongest imagination of everyone I've ever known." "There are no ghosts," I answered softly. I scowled at our little fire. I laid a few more lumps of coal on it. All the humor went out of Nicholas. "How in the hell could he know about the wolves? And how could you—" "I told you already, I don't know," I said. I sat thinking and not saying anything, disgusted maybe at how ridiculous it all seemed. And then, as we remained silent together, the fire was the only sound or movement in the room. The name Wolf Killer came to me very distinctly, as if someone had spoken it. But nobody had. I looked at Nicky, painfully aware that his lips had never moved, and I think all the blood drained from my face. I felt not the dread of death as I had so many other nights, but an emotion that was really alien to me. Fear. I was still sitting there, too unsure of myself to say anything, when Nicholas kissed me. "Let's go to bed," he said softly. All right, end of part 1. Any thoughts? Well, I need a bit of water.
Lestat really, I mean, really just needs to fucking like,
Needs.
he really needs to seek them.
yeah, that's the start. He's needed therapy for a while, my god. But I'm interested to see where this goes.
Every time I hear about Lestat,
I don't even know who's more hornier, Dorian Gray or Lestat.
Well, I mean, he straight up kissed one of the actresses that kissed him passionately in return, so he doesn't care who's who. He fucking.
well, Lestat follows under the belief of if there's a hole, there's a hole.
Oh, I hate how true that is. Okay.
Front, back, up, and down.
Front, back, up, and down. My god. Okay. Alright, we're gonna start part 2. Y'all ready? Doesn't sound very enthusiastic, but okay, I'll take it. Part 2. The Legacy of Magnus. Chapter 1. It must have been 3 o'clock in the morning. I'd heard the church bells in my sleep. And like all sensible men in Paris, we'd had our door barred and our windows locked. Not good for a room with a coal fire, but the room was a path to our window. And we were locked in. I was dreaming of the wolves. I was on the mountain and surrounded, and I was swinging the old medieval flail. Then the wolves were dead again, and the dream was better, only I had all those miles to walk in the snow. The horse screamed in the snow. My mare turned into a loathsome insect half smashed on the stone floor. A voice said, "Wolf Killer," long and low, a whisper that was like a summons and a tribute at the same time. I opened my eyes, or I thought I did, and there was someone standing in the room, a tall, bent figure with its back to the little hearth. Embers still glowed on the hearth. The light moved upwards, etching the edges of the figure clearly, then dying out before it reached the shoulders, the head. But I realized I was looking right at the white face I'd seen in the audience at the theater, and my mind, opening, sharpening, realized the room was locked, that Nicholas lay beside me, that this figure stood over our bed. I heard Nicholas's breathing. I looked into the white face. "Wolf Killer," came the voice again, but the lips hadn't moved, and the figure drew nearer, and I saw that the face was no mask. Black eyes, quick and calculating black eyes, and white skin, and some appalling smell coming from it, like the smell of moldering clothes in a damp room. I think I rose up, or perhaps I was lifted, because in an instant I was standing on my feet. The sleep was slipping off me like garments. I was backing up into the wall. The figure had my red cloak in its hands. Desperately, I thought of my sword, my muskets. They were under the bed on the floor, and the thing thrust the red cloak towards me, and then, through the fur-lined velvet, I felt its hand close on the lapel of my coat. I was torn forward. I was drawn off my feet across the room. I shouted for Nicholas. I screamed, "Nicky! Nicky!" as loud as I could. I saw the partially opened window, and then suddenly the glass burst into thousands of fragments, and the wooden frame was broken out. I was flying over the alleyway, 6 stories above the ground. I screamed. I kicked at this thing that was carrying me. Caught up in the red cloak, I twisted, trying to get loose. But we were flying over the rooftop, and now going up the straight surface of a brick wall. I was dangling in the arm of the creature, and then very suddenly on the surface of a high place I was thrown down. I lay for a moment seeing Paris spread out before me in a great circle, the white snow and chimney pots and church belfries, and the lowering sky. And then I rose up, stumbling over the fur-lined cloak, and I started to run. I ran to the edge of the roof and looked down. Nothing but a sheer drop of hundreds of feet, and then to another edge, and it was exactly the same. I almost fell. I turned, desperate, panting. We were on the top of some square tower, no more than 50 feet across, and I could see I could see nothing higher in any direction. And the figure stood staring at me, and I heard come out of it a low, rasping laughter, just like the whisper before. "Wolf Killer," it said again. "Damn you!" I shouted. "Who the hell are you?" And in a rage, I flew at it with my fists. It didn't move. I struck it as if I were striking the brick wall. I veritably bounced off it, loosing my footing in the snow and scrambling up and attacking it again. Its laughter grew louder and louder, and deliberately mocking, but with a strong undercurrent of pleasure that was even more maddening than the mockery. I ran to the edge of the tower and then turned on the creature again. "What do you want with me?" I demanded. "Who are you?" And when it gave nothing but this maddening laughing, I went for it again. But this time I went for the face and the neck, and I made my hands like claws to do it, and I pulled off the hood and saw the creature's black hair and the full shape of its human-looking head. Soft skin, yet it was as immovable as before. It backed up a little, raising its arms to play with me, to push me back and forth as a man would push a little child. Too fast for my eyes, it moved its face away from me, turning to one side and then the other, and all of these movements with seeming effortlessness, as I frantically tried to hurt it and could feel nothing but that soft white skin sliding under my fingers, and maybe once or twice its fine black hair. "Brave, strong little wolf killer," it said to me now in a rounder, deeper voice. I stopped, panting and covered with sweat, staring at it and seeing the details of its face, the deep lines I had only glimpsed in the theater, its mouth drawn up in a jester's smile. "Oh, God, help me, I said as I backed away. It seemed impossible that such a face should move, show expression, and gaze with such affection on me as it did. "God!" "What God is that, wolf killer?" it asked. I turned my back on it and let out a terrible roar. I felt its hands close on my shoulders like things forged of metal, and as I went into a last frenzy of struggle, it whipped me around so that its eyes were right before me, wide and dark, and the lips were closed, yet still smiling, and then it bent down, and I felt the prick of its teeth on my neck. Out of all the childhood tales, the old fables, the name came to me, like a drowned thing shooting to the surface of black water and breaking free in the light. Vampire! I gave one last frantic cry, shoving at the creature with all I had. Then there was silence. Stillness. I knew that we were still on the roof. I knew that I was being held in the thing's arms, yet it seemed like we had risen, become weightless, were traveling through the darkness even more easily than we had traveled before. Yes, yes, I wanted to say. Exactly. And a great noise was echoing all around me, enveloping me, the sound of a deep gong, perhaps, being struck very slowly in perfect rhythm, its sound washing through me so that I had felt the most extraordinary pleasure through all my limbs. My lips moved, but nothing came out of them, yet this didn't really matter. All the things I had ever wanted to say were clear to me, and that is what mattered. Not that they be expressed. And there was so much time, so much sweet time in which to say anything and do anything. There was no urgency at all. Rapture. I said the word, and it seemed clear to me, that one word, though I couldn't speak or really move my lips, and I realized I was no longer breathing. Yet something was making me breathe. It was breathing for me, and the breaths came with the rhythm of the gong, which was nothing to do with my body. And I loved it, the rhythm, the way that it went on, and I no longer had to breathe or speak or know anything. My mother smiled at me, and I said, "I love you," to her, and she said, "Yes, always loved, always loved." And I was sitting in the monastery library, and I was 12 years old, and the monk said to me, "A great scholar," and I opened all the books and could read everything, Latin, Greek, French. The illuminated letters were indescribably beautiful, and I turned around and faced the audience in Renaud's theater and saw all of them on their feet, and a woman moved the painted fan from in front of her face, and it was Marie Antoinette. She said, "Wolf killer," and Nicholas was running towards me, crying for me to come back. His face was full of anguish, his hair was loose, and his eyes were rimmed with blood. He tried to catch me. I said, "Nicky, get away from me." And I realized in agony, positive agony, that the sound of the gong was fading away. I cried out, I begged, "Don't stop it, please, please. I don't want to. I don't. Please." "Lelio, the wolf killer," said the thing, and it was holding me in its arms, and I was crying because the spell was breaking. Don't. It was heavy all over. My body had come back to me with its aches and its pains and my own choking cries, and I was being lifted, thrown upwards, until I fell over the creature's shoulder, and I felt its arm around my knees. I wanted to say, "God protect me." I wanted to say it with every particle of me, but I couldn't say it. And there was the alleyway below me again, that drop of hundreds of feet, and the whole of Paris tilted at an appalling angle, and there was the snow and the searing wind. Chapter 2. I was awake, and I was very thirsty. I wanted a great deal of very cold white wine, the way it is when you bring it up from the cellar in autumn. I wanted something fresh and sweet to eat, like a ripe apple. It did occur to me that I had lost my reason, though I couldn't have said why. I opened my eyes and knew it was early evening. The light might have been morning light, but too much time had passed for that. It was evening. And through a wide, heavily barred stone window, I saw hills and woods blanketed with snow and the vast, tiny collection of rooftops and towers that made up the city far away. I hadn't seen it like this since the day I came in the post carriage. I closed my eyes and the vision of it remained, as if I'd never opened my eyes at all. But it was no vision. It was there. And the room was warm in spite of the window. There had been a fire in the room. I could smell it, but the fire had gone out. I tried to reason, but I couldn't stop thinking about cold white wine and apples in the basket. I could see the apples. I felt myself drop down out of the branches of the tree, and I smelled all around me the freshly cut grass. The sunlight was blinding on the green fields. It shone on Nicholas's brown hair and on the deep lacquer of the deep lacquer of the violin. The music climbed up to the soft the music climbed up to the soft rolling clouds, and against the sky I saw the battlements of my father's house. Battlements. I opened my eyes again, and I knew I was lying in a high tower room several miles from Paris. And in front of me on a crude little wooden table was a bottle of cold white wine, precisely as I had dreamed it. For a long time I looked at it, looked at the frost of droplets covering it, and I could not believe it possible to reach for it and drink. Never had I known the thirst I was suffering now, my whole body thirst, and I was so weak, and I was getting a little cold. The room moved when I moved. The sky gleamed in the window. And when at last I did reach for the bottle and pull the cork from it and smell the tart, delicious aroma, I drank and drank without stopping, not caring what would happen to me, or where I was, or why the bottle had been set here. My head swung forward. The bottle was almost empty, and the faraway city was vanishing in the black sky, leaving a little sea of lights behind it. I put my hands to my head. The bed on which I had been sleeping was no more than stone with straws strewn about it, and it was coming to me slowly that I might be in some sort of jail. But the wine, it had been too good for a jail. Who would give a prisoner wine like that unless, of course, the prisoner was to be executed? And another aroma came to me, rich and overpowering, and so delicious that it made me moan. I looked about, or I should say, I tried to look about, because I was almost too weak to move. But the source of this aroma was near to me, and it was a large bowl of beef broth. The broth was thick with bits of meat, and I could see the steam rising from it. It was still hot. I grabbed it in both hands immediately, and I drank it as thoughtlessly and greedily as I'd drunk the wine. It was so satisfying, it was. It was so satisfying, it was as if I'd never known any food like it. That rich, boiled-down essence of the meat, and when the bowl was empty, I fell back, almost sick, on the straw. Or I fell back full, almost sick, on the straw. It seemed something moved in the darkness near me, but I was not sure. I heard the chink of glass. "More wine," said a voice to me, and I knew the voice. Gradually I began remembering everything, scaling the walls, the small square rooftop, that smiling white face. For one moment I thought, no, quite impossible. It must have been a nightmare. But this just wasn't so. It had happened, and I remembered the rapture suddenly, the sound of the gong, and I felt myself grow dizzy as though I were losing consciousness again. I stopped it. I wouldn't let it happen, and fear crept over me so that I didn't dare to move. "More wine," said the voice again. Turning my head slightly, I saw a new bottle, corked but ready for me, outlined against the window's luminous glow. I felt the thirst again, and this time it was heightened by the salt of the broth. I wiped my lips, and then I reached for the bottle, and again I drank. I fell back against the stone wall, and I struggled to look clearly through the darkness, half afraid of what I knew I would see. Of course, I was very drunk now. I saw the window, the city. I saw the little table, and as my eyes moved slowly over the dusky corners of the room, I saw him there. He no longer wore his black hooded cape, and he didn't sit or stand as a man might. Rather, he leaned to rest, it seemed, upon the thick stone frame of the window, one knee bent a little towards it, the other long, spindly leg sprawled out to the other side. His arms appeared to hang at his sides, and the whole impression was of something limp and lifeless, and yet his face was as animated as it had been the night before. Huge black eyes seeming to stretch the white flesh in deep folds, the nose long and thin, and the mouth the jester's smile. There were the fanged teeth just touching the colorless lip, and the hair, a gleaming mass of black and silver growing up high from the white forehead, and flowing down over his shoulders and arms. I think that he laughed. I was beyond terror. I could not even scream. I had dropped the wine. The glass bottle was rolling on the floor, and as I tried to move forward to gather my senses and to make my body more than something drunken and sluggish, his thin, gangly limbs found animation all at once. He advanced on me. I didn't cry out. I gave a low roar of angry terror and scrambled up off the bed, tripping over the small table and running from him as fast as I could. But he caught me in long white fingers that were as powerful and as cold as they had been the night before. "Let me go, damn you! Damn you! Damn you!" I was stammering. My reason told me to plead, and I tried. "I'll just go away, please. Let me out of here. You have to. Let me go." His gaunt face loomed over me, his lips drawn up sharply into his white cheeks, and he laughed, a low, riotous laugh that seemed endless. I struggled, pushing at him uselessly, pleading with him again, stammering nonsense and apologies, and then I cried, "God help me!" He clapped one of those monstrous hands over my mouth. "No more of that in my presence, wolf killer, or I'll feed you to the wolves of hell," he said with a little sneer. Answer me. I nodded, and he loosened his grip. His voice had had a momentary calming effect. He sounded capable of reason when he spoke. He sounded almost sophisticated. He lifted his hands and stroked my head as I cringed. "Sunlight in the hair," he whispered, "and the blue sky fixed forever in your eyes." He seemed almost meditative as he looked at me. His breath had no smell whatsoever, nor did his body, it seemed. The smell of mold was coming from his clothes. I didn't dare to move, though he was not holding me. I stared at his garments. A ruined silk shirt with bag sleeves and smocking at the neck of it, and worsted leggings and short, ragged pantaloons. In some, he was dressed as men had been centuries before. I had seen such clothes and tapestries in my home, in the paintings of Caravaggio and Latour that hung in my mother's rooms. "You're perfect, my Lelio, my wolf killer," he said to me, his long mouth opening wide so that again I saw the small white fangs. They were the only teeth he possessed. I shuddered. I felt myself dropping to the floor, but he picked me up easily with one arm and laid me down gently on the bed. And in my mind I was praying fiercely, "God help me, the Virgin Mary help me, help me, help me," as I peered up into his face. What was it I was seeing? What I had seen the night before? The mask of old age, this grinning thing cut deeply with the marks of time and yet frozen, it seemed, and hard as his hands. He wasn't a living thing. He was a monster. A vampire was what he was, a blood-sucking corpse from the grave, gifted with an intellect. And his limbs, why did they so horrify me? He looked like a human, but he didn't move like a human. It didn't seem to matter to him whether he walked or crawled, bent or knelt. It filled me with loathing, yet he fascinated me. I had to admit it, he fascinated me. But I was in too much danger to allow such a strange state of mind. He gave a deep laugh now, his knees wide apart, his fingers resting on my cheek as he made a great arc over me. "Yes, lovely one, I'm hard to look at," he said. His voice was still a whisper, and he spoke in long gasps. "I was old when I was made, and you're perfect, my Lelio, my blue-eyed young one, more beautiful even without the lights of the stage." The long white hand played with my hair again, lifting up the strands and letting them drop as he sighed. "Don't weep, wolf killer," he said. "You're chosen, and your tawdry little triumphs in the house of Thespians will be nothing once this night comes to a close." Again came that low riot of laughter. There was no doubt in my mind, at least at this moment, that he was from the devil, that God and the devil existed, that beyond the isolation I'd known only hours ago lay this vast realm of dark beings and hideous meanings, and I had been swallowed into it somehow. It occurred to me quite clearly I was being punished for my life, and yet that seemed absurd. Millions believed as I believed the world over. Why the hell was this happening to me? And a grim possibility started irresistibly to take shape, that the world was no more meaningful than before, and this was but another horror. "In God's name, get away!" I shouted. I had to believe in God now. I had to. That was absolutely the only hope. I went to make the sign of the cross. For one moment he stared at me, his eyes wide with rage, and then he remained still. He watched me make the sign of the cross. He listened to me call upon God again and again. He only smiled, making his face a perfect mask of comedy from the proscenium arch. And I went into a spasm of crying like a child. "The devil reigns in heaven, and heaven is hell," I said to him. "Oh, God, don't desert me," I called on all the saints I had ever for a little while loved. He struck me hard across the face. I fell to one side and almost slipped from the bed to the floor. The room went round. The sour taste of the wine rose in my mouth, and I felt his fingers again on my neck. "Yes, fight, wolf killer," he said. "Don't go into hell without a battle. Mock God." "I don't mock," I protested. Once again he pulled me to himself, and I fought him harder than I had ever fought anyone or anything in my existence, even the wolves. I beat on him, kicked him, tore at his hair, but I might as well have fought the animated gargoyles from a cathedral. He was that powerful. He only smiled. Then all the expression went out of his face. It seemed to become very long, the cheeks were hollow, the eyes wide and almost wondering, and he opened his mouth, the lower lip contracted. I saw the fangs. Damn you, damn you, damn you! I was roaring and bellowing, and he drew closer and the teeth went through my flesh. Not this time. I was raging. Not this time. I will not feel it. I will resist. I will fight for my soul this time. But it was happening again. The sweetness and the softness in the world far away, and even he in his ugliness was curiously outside of me, like an insect pressed against the glass who causes no loathing in us because he cannot touch us, and the sound of the gong and the exquisite pleasure, and then I was altogether lost. I was incorporeal, and the pleasure was incorporeal. I was nothing but pleasure, and I slipped into a web of radiant dreams. A catacomb I saw, a rank place, and a white vampire creature walking in a shallow grave. Bound in heavy chains he was, the vampire, and over him bent this monster who had abducted me, and I knew that his name was Magnus, and that he was mortal still in this dream, a great and powerful alchemist, and he had unearthed and bound this slumbering vampire right before the crucial hour of dusk. And now as the light died out of the heavens, Magnus drank from his helpless immortal prisoner the magical and accursed blood that would make him one of the living dead. Treachery it was, the theft of immortality. A dark Prometheus stealing a luminescent fire. A laughter in the darkness, laughter echoing in the catacomb, echoing as if down the centuries. And the stench of the grave, and the ecstasy absolutely fathomless and irresistible, and then drawing to a finish. I was crying. I lay on the straw, and I said, "Please, don't stop it." Magnus was no longer holding me, and my breathing was once again my own, and the dreams were dissolved. I fell down and down as the night full of stars slid upwards, jewels affixed to a dark purple veil. Clever that. I had thought the sky was real. The cold winter air was moving just a little in the room. I felt the tears on my face. I was consumed with thirst. And far, far away from me, Magnus stood looking down at me, his hands dangling low beside his thin legs. I tried to move. I was craving. My whole body was thirsty. "You're dying, wolf killer," he said. "The light's going out of your blue eyes, as if all the summer days are gone." "No, please." This thirst was unbearable. My mouth was open, gaping, my back arched, and it was here at last, the final horror. Death itself. Like this. "Ask for it, child," he said, his face no longer the grinning mask, but utterly transfigured with compassion. He looked almost human, almost naturally old. "Ask and you shall receive," he said. "I saw water rushing down all the mountain streams of my childhood. Help me, please. I shall give you the water of all waters," he said in my ear, and it seemed he wasn't white at all. He was just an old man, sitting there beside me. His face was human and almost sad. But as I watched his smile and his gray eyebrows rise in wonder, I knew it wasn't true. He wasn't human. He was that same ancient monster, only he was filled with my blood. "The wine of all wines," he breathed. "This is my body. This is my blood." And then his arms surrounded me. They drew me to him, and I felt a great warmth emanating from him. And he seemed to be filled not with blood, but with love for me. "Ask for it, wolf killer, and you will live forever," he said. But his voice sounded weary and spiritless, and there was something distant and tragic in his gaze. I felt my head turn to the side, my body a heavy and damp thing that I couldn't control. I will not ask. I will die without asking. And then the great despair I feared so much lay before me, the emptiness that was death, and I still said no. In pure horror I said no. I will not bow down to it, the chaos and the horror. I said no. "Life everlasting," he whispered. My head fell on his shoulder. "Stubborn wolf killer." His lips touched me, warm, odorless, breath on my neck. "Not stubborn," I whispered. My voice was so weak I wondered if he could hear me. "Brave," Not stubborn. It seemed pointless not to say it. What was vanity now? What was anything at all? And such a trivial word was stubborn, so cruel. He lifted my face, and holding me with his right hand, he lifted his left hand and gashed his own throat with his nails. My body went double in a convulsion of terror, but he pressed my face to the wound as he said, "Drink." I heard my scream deafening in my own ears, and the blood that was flowing out of the wound touched my parched and cracking lips. The thirst seemed to hiss aloud, my tongue licked at the blood, and a great whiplash of sensation caught me, and my mouth opened and locked itself to the wound. I drew with all my power upon the great fount that I knew would satisfy my thirst as it had never been satisfied before. Blood and blood and blood, and it was not merely the dry hissing coil of the thirst that was quenching and dissolved. It was all my craving, all the wanton misery and hunger that I had ever known. My mouth widened and pressed harder to him. I felt the blood coursing down the length of my throat. I felt his head against me. I felt the tight enclosure of his arms. I was against him, and I could feel his sinews, his bones, the very contour of his hands. I knew his body. And yet there was this numbness creeping through me, and a rapturous tingling as each sensation penetrated the numbness, and was amplified in the penetration so that it became fuller, keener, and I could almost see what I felt. But the supreme part of it remained the sweet, luscious blood filling me as I drank and drank. More of it, more, this was all I could think. If I thought it all, and for all its thick substance, it was like light passing into me. So brilliant did it seem to the mind, so blinding that red stream, and all the desperate desires of my life were 1,000-fold fed. But his body, the scaffolding to which I clung, was weakening beneath me. I could hear his breath in feeble gasps. Yet he didn't make me stop. "Love you," I wanted to say. "Magnus, my unearthly master. Ghastly thing that you are. Love you, love you. This was what I had always wanted. This is what I had always so wanted, and could never have. This, and you've given it to me." I felt I would die if I went on, and on it did go. And I did not die. And quite suddenly I felt his gentle, loving hands caressing my shoulders, and with this incalculable strength he forced me backwards. I let out a long, mournful cry. Its misery alarmed me, but he was pulling me to my feet. He still held me in his arms. He brought me to the window, and I stood looking out. With my hands out to the stone on either side, I was shaking, and the blood in me pulsed in all my veins. I leaned my forehead against the iron bars. Far, far below lay the dark cusp of a hill, overgrown with trees that appeared to shimmer in the faint light of the stars. And beyond, the city with its wilderness of little lights sunk in not in darkness, but in a soft violet mist. The snow everywhere was luminescent, melting. Rooftops, towers, walls, all were myriad facets of lavender, mauve, rose. This was the sprawling metropolis. As I narrowed my eyes, I saw a million windows, like so many projections of beams of light. And then, as if this were not enough, in the very depths I saw the unmistakable movement of the people. Tiny mortals on tiny streets, heads and hands touching in the shadows, a lone man no more than a speck ascending a wind-blown belfry, a million souls on the tessellated surface of the night, and coming soft on the air, a dim mingling of countless human voices. Cries, songs, the faintest wisps of music, the muted throb of bells. I moaned. The breeze seemed to lift my hair, and I heard my own voice as if I had never heard it before, crying. The city dimmed. I let it go. Its swarming millions lost again in the vast and wondrous play of lilac shadow and fading light. "Oh, what have you done? What is this that you've given to me?" I whispered. And it seemed my words did not stop one after another. Rather, they ran together until all of my crying was one immense and coherent sound that perfectly amplified my horror and my joy. If there was a God, he did not matter now. He was part of some dull and dreary realm whose secrets had long ago been plundered, whose lights had long ago gone out. This was the pulsing center of life itself, round which all true complexity resolved. Ah, the allure of that complexity, the sense of being there. Behind me, the scratch of the monster's feet came on the stones, and then I turned and I saw him white and blood-dry and like a great husk of himself. His eyes were stained with blood-red tears, and he reached out to me as if in pain. I gathered him to my chest. I felt such love for him as I had never known before. "Ah, don't you see," came the ghastly voice with its long words whispering without end. "My heir chosen to take the dark gift from me, and with more fibre and courage than 10 mortal men. What a child of darkness you are to be." I kissed his eyelids. I gathered his soft black hair in my hands. He was no ghastly thing to me now, but merely that which was strange and white, and full of some deeper lesson, perhaps, than the sighing trees below, or the shimmering city calling me over the hills. His sunken cheeks, his long throat, the thin legs, these were but the natural parts of him. "No, fledgling," he sighed, "save your kisses for the world. My time has come, and you owe me but one obedience only. Follow me now." Damn, okay. Comments, questions, concerns?
Lestat is the biggest drama queen I've ever fucking heard of in my entire life.
Yeah. This is his memoir. He's kind of allowed to be. Wait, say that again?
Imagine, if you will, you are in a cave in some type of dungeon cell, and Nosferatu, like not even like old school Nosferatu, long claws, long ears, bald head, looks like he just got out of his jaundice convention. Just decided to come in and be like, "Hey, you want in on this action?" And you're like, "Yeah, shit, sure, why not?" And then,
Yeah, fucking, I'm all about that shit.
like, you just keep it in your pants for 1 minute, bro. Like, you don't even know if exists yet.
You don't know if vampire STDs exist.
No, that's a real concern.
Yes, it is.
Laughing, but like, no, that's
No, that's true. That's true. Like in Vampire the Masquerade, there are vampires that are basically walking, carrion, like, festering diseases. Like, they contain every STD, viral disease, blood disease known to man. They're nightmares. And that's just Vampire the Masquerade. Okay.
Meanwhile, Lestat is just out here, "I love you!"
Well, granted, the act of vampirism does have a mystical compact with people. Like, that is now his master. He cannot help it anymore. This is just the way things are now.
Okay, so do I have to imagine, like, in this after the book, we're just going to see Lestat in the Wooders episode or My Strange Addiction?
No, probably not. I don't know. I think he's too proper for that.
Too proper, bitch. TLC is like, no, I'm pretty sure he owns TLC eventually.
Well, he would own it to watch it, not to be a part of it.
Lestat is unironically out here fighting and you saying it's crazy.
Okay.
If it's not TLC, it might be Bravo.
Might be Bravo. Or worse, he gets BET, just for the fuck of it.
Nah, actually, no, MTV.
Oh, yes. Yeah. Well, remember, he started the book saying that he loved watching MTV. Remember that. That's an important, distinct detail that we will get back to, I promise.
So did he like the ever-inducing change of music videos at the Jersey Shore, or did he think that's a perfect evolution?
Wait, you must watch my favorite show with me. Yes, Jersey Shore. I love the situation.
Come, Louis. Come, Louis. We must hear the magical tales of the situation.
Louis, listen, Louis. Have you ever heard of the ever-ancient tales of the Real Housewives of Hollywood?
Oh, shut up, Louis! Shut up, Louis! The newest episode of Keeping Up with the Kardashians is on! I must see this!
Louis, we must GTL. We must GTL. Jim, Todd, and Lotion. Jim, Tam, and Monty.
Louis, look, it's a documentary of whales. That's my 600-pound life. No,
I know, Louis! It's magical! Okay, let's go for a few more chapters, because they're going to be pretty short. I can probably get through these rather quick.
Yeah.
Actually, how long is this part? Hold on a minute, I'm curious now. How many chapters is this fucking part? Give me a second. I'm piquing my curiosity.
If I was Louis having to deal with Lestat's bullshit, I'd be up a fucking wall.
Okay.
Why do you think he stabbed him? Why do you think he left?
No, you're right.
Okay,
if you put it in that context, everything makes so much more sense.
We're roughly a fifth of the way through part 2. So let's go through a few more chapters, because then we'll be close to halfway in chapter count. We got pretty far in for part 2. That's rather impressive. Okay. Okay. Chapter 3. Down a winding stairs he drew me, and everything I beheld absorbed me. Excuse me, please. The rough-cut stones seemed to give forth their own light, and even the rats shooting past in the dark had a curious beauty. Then he unlocked a thick, iron-studded wooden door, and, giving over his heavy key ring to me, led me to a large and barren room. "You are now my heir, as I told you," he said. "You'll take possession of this house and all my treasure, but you'll do as I say first." The barred windows gave a limitless view of the moonlit clouds, and I saw the soft, shimmering city again, as if it were spreading its arms. "Ah, later you may drink your fill of it, of all you see," he said. He turned me towards him as he stood before a huge heap of wood that lay in the center of the floor. "Listen carefully," he said, "for I am about to leave you." He gestured to the wood offhandedly. "And there are things you must know. You're immortal now, and your nature shall lead you soon enough to your first human victim. Be swift and show no mercy, but stop your feasting, no matter how delicious, before the victim's heart ceases to beat. In years come, you'll be strong enough to feel that great moment, but for the present pass the cup to time just before it's empty, or you may pay heavily for your pride." "But why are you leaving me?" I asked desperately. I clung to him. Victims, mercy, feasting. I felt myself bombarded by these words as if I were being physically beaten. He pulled away so easily that my hands were hurt by his movement, and I wound up staring at them, marveling at the strange quality of the pain. It wasn't like mortal pain. He stopped, however, and pointed to the stones of the wall opposite. I could see that one very large stone had been dislodged, and lay a foot from the unbroken surface around it. "Grasp that stone," he said, "and pull it out of the wall." But I can't," I said. It must wait." "Pull it out." He pointed with one of his long, bony fingers and grimaced, so I tried to do it as he said. To my pure astonishment, I was able to move the stone easily, and I saw beyond it a dark opening just large enough for a man to enter if he crawled on his face. He gave a dry, cackling laugh and nodded his head. "There, my son, is the passageway that leads to my treasure," he said. "Do with my treasure as you like, and with all my earthly property, but for now I must have my vows." And again, astonishing me, he snatched up 2 twigs from the wood and rubbed them together so fiercely that they were soon burning with bright small flames. This he tossed at the heap, and the pitch in it caused the fire to leap up at once, throwing an immense light over the curved ceiling and the stone walls. I gasped and stepped back. The riot of yellow and orange color enchanted and frightened me, and the heat, though I felt it, did not cause me a sensation I understood. There was no natural alarm that I should be burned by it. Rather, the warmth was exquisite, and I realized for the first time how cold I had been. The cold was an icing on me, and the fire melted it, and I almost moaned. He laughed again, that hollow, gasping laugh, and started to dance about it in the light. his thin legs making him look like a skeleton dancing, with the white face of a man. He crooked his arms over his head, bent his torso and his knees, and turned round and around as he circled the fire. "Mon Dieu!" I whispered. I was reeling. Horrifying it might have been only an hour ago to see him dancing like this, but now in the flickering glare he was a spectacle that drew me after it step by step. The light exploded on his satin rags, the pantaloons he wore, the tattered shirt. "But you can't leave me!" I pleaded, trying to keep my thoughts clear, trying to realize what he had been saying. My voice was monstrous in my ears. I tried to make it lower, softer, more like it should have been. "Where will you go?" He gave his loudest laugh then, slapping his thigh and dancing faster and farther away from me, his hands out as if to embrace the fire. The thickest logs were only now catching. The room, for all its size, was like a great clay oven, smoke pouring out its windows. "Not the fire." Not the fire. I flew backwards, flattening myself against the wall. "You can't go into that fire!" Fear was overwhelming me, as if every sight and sound had overwhelmed me. It was like every sensation I had known so far. I couldn't resist it or deny it. It was half whimpering and half screaming. "Oh, yes, I can," he laughed. "Yes, I can." He threw back his head and let his laughter stretch into howls. "But from you, fledgling," he said, stopping before me with his finger out again. "Promise now. Come, a little mortal honor, my brave wolf-killer. Or, though it will cleave my heart in two, I shall throw you into the fire and claim for myself another offspring. Answer me." I tried to speak. I nodded my head. In the raging light I could see my hands had become white, and I felt a stab of pain in my lower lip that almost made me cry out. My eye-teeth had become fangs already. I felt them and looked at him in panic, but he was leering at me as if he enjoyed my terror. "Now, after I am burned up," he said, snatching my wrist, "and the fire is out, you must scatter the ashes. Hear me, little one. Scatter the ashes, or else I might return. And in what shape that should be, I dare not contemplate. But mark my words, if you allow me to come back more hideous than I am now, I shall hunt you down and burn you till you are scarred the same as I. Do you hear me?" I still couldn't bring myself to answer. This was not fear. It was hell. I could feel my teeth growing and my body tingling all over. Frantically, I nodded my head. "Ah, yes," he smiled, nodding too, the fire licking the ceiling behind him, the light leaking all about the edges of his face. "It's only mercy, I ask, that I go now to find hell, if there is a hell, or sweet oblivion, which surely I do not deserve. If there is a prince of darkness, then I shall set eyes upon him at last. I shall spit in his face. So scatter what is burned, as I command you, and when that is done, take yourself to my lair through the low passage, being most careful to replace the stone behind you as you enter there. Within you will find my coffin, and in that box, or the like of it, you must seal yourself by day, or the sun's light shall burn you to a cinder. Mark my words, nothing on earth can end your life save the sun, or a blaze such as you see before you, and even then only, I say, only if your ashes are scattered when it is done." I turned my face away from him and away from the flames. I had begun to cry, and the only thing that kept me from sobbing was the hand I clapped to my mouth. But he pulled me about the edge of the fire until we stood before the loose stone, his finger pointing at it again. "Please stay with me, please," I begged him. "Only a little while, only one night, I beg you." Again the volume of my voice terrified me. It wasn't my voice at all. I put my arms around him. I held tight to him. His gaunt white face was inexplicably beautiful to me, his black eyes filled with the strangest expression. The light flickered on his hair, his eyes, and then again he made his mouth into a jester's smile. "Ah, greedy son," he said, "it is not enough to be a mortal, with all the world you repast. Goodbye, little one. Do as I say. Remember, the ashes. And beyond this stone, the inner chamber. Therein lies all that you will need to prosper." I struggled to hold on to him, and he laughed low in my ear, marveling at my strength. "Excellent, excellent," he whispered. "Now live forever, beautiful wolf-killer, with the gifts which I have added to the lot." He sent me stumbling away from him, and he leapt so high and so far into the very middle of the flames. He appeared to be flying. I saw him descend. I saw the fire catch his garments. It seemed his head had become a torch, and then all of a sudden his eyes grew wide and his mouth became a great black cavern, and the radiance of the flames and his laughter arose in such piercing volume. I covered my ears. He appeared to jump up and down on all fours in the flames, and I suddenly realized that my cries had drowned out his laughter. The spindly black arms and legs rose and fell, and suddenly appeared to wither. The fire shifted, roared, and in the heart of it I could see nothing now but the blaze itself. Yet still I cried. I fell down upon my knees, my hands over my eyes, but against my closed lids I could still see it. One vast explosion of sparks after another until I pressed my forehead on the stones. For years it seemed I lay on the floor, watching the fire burn itself out to charred timbers. Chapter 4. The room had cooled. The freezing air moved through the open window, and again I wept. My own sobs reverberated in my ears until I felt I couldn't endure the sound of them, and it was no comfort to know that all things were magnified in this state, even the misery that I felt. Now and then I prayed again. I begged for forgiveness, though forgiveness for what I couldn't have said. I prayed to the Blessed Mother, to the saints. I murmured the Aves over and over until they became a senseless chant, and my tears were blood, and they left their stain on my hands when I wiped at my face. Then I lay flat on the stones, murmuring not prayers any longer, but those inarticulate pleas we make to all that is powerful, all that is holy, all that may or may not exist by any and all names. Do not leave me alone here. Do not abandon me. I am in the witch's place. It's the witch's place. Do not let me fall even farther than I have already fallen this night. Do not let it happen. Lestat, wake up. But Magnus's words came back to me over and over. To find hell, if there is a hell, if there is a prince of darkness. Finally, I rose on my hands and knees. I felt lightheaded and mad, and almost giddy. I looked at the fire and saw that I might still bring it back to a roaring blaze and throw myself into it. But even as I forced myself to imagine the agony of this, I knew that I had no intention of doing it. After all, why should I do it? What had I done to deserve the witch's fate? I didn't want to be in hell, even for a moment. I sure as hell wasn't going there just to spit in the face of the Prince of Darkness, whoever he might be. On the contrary, if I was a damned thing, then let the son of a bitch come for me. Let him tell me why I was meant to suffer. I would truly like to know. As for oblivion, well, we can wait a little while for that. We can think this over for a little while, at least. An alien calm crept slowly over me. I was dark, full of bitterness and growing fascination. I wasn't human anymore. And as I crouched there thinking about it and looking at the dying embers, an immense strength was gathering in me. Gradually my boyish sobs died away, and I commenced to study the whiteness of my skin, the sharpness of the two evil little teeth, and the way that my fingernails gleamed in the dark as though they'd been lacquered. All the little familiar aches were gone out of my body, and the remaining warmth that came from the smoking wood was good to me, as something laid over me or wrapped about me. Time passed, yet it did not pass. Each change in the moving air was caressing, and when there came from the softly lighted city beyond a chorus of dim church bells ringing the hour, they did not mark the passage of mortal time. They were only the purest music, and I lay stunned, my mouth opened, as I stared at the passing clouds. But in my chest I started to feel a new pain, very hot and mercurial. It moved through my veins, tightened about my head, and then seemed to collect itself in my bowels and belly. I narrowed my eyes. I cocked my head to one side. I realized I wasn't afraid of this pain. Rather, I was feeling it as if I were listening to it. And I saw the cause of it then. My waist was leaving me in a small torrent. I felt myself unable to control it. Yet as I watched the foulness stain my clothes, this didn't disgust me. Rats creeping into the very room, approaching this filth on their tiny soundless feet. Even these did not disgust me. These things couldn't touch me, even as they crawled all over me to devour the waste. In fact, I could imagine nothing in the dark, not even the slithering insects of the grave, that could bring about revulsion in me. Let them crawl on my hands and face, it wouldn't matter now. I wasn't part of the world that cringed at such things. and with a smile I realized that I was of the dark ilk that makes others cringe. Slowly and with great pleasure I laughed, and yet my grief was not entirely gone from me. It lingered like an idea, and that idea had a pure truth to it. I am dead. I am a vampire. And things will die so that I may live. I will drink their blood so that I may live. And I will never, never see Nicholas again, nor my mother, nor any of the humans I have known and loved, nor any of my human family. I'll drink blood, and I'll live forever. That is exactly what will be, and what will be is only beginning. It is just born, and the labor that brought it forth was rapture such as I had never known. I climbed to my feet. I felt myself light and powerful and strangely numbed, and I went to the dead fire and walked through the burnt timbers. There were no bones. It was as if the fiend had disintegrated. What ashes I could gather in my hands I took to the window, and as the wind caught them I whispered a farewell to Magnus, wondering if he could yet hear me. At last only charred logs were left, and the soot that I wiped with my hands and dusted off into the darkness. It was time now to examine the inner room. Chapter 5. The stone moved out easily enough, as I'd seen before, and it was a hook on the inside of it by which I could pull it closed behind me. But to get into the narrow dark passage I had to lie on my belly, and when I dropped down on my knees and peered into it, I could see no visible light at the end. I didn't like the look of it. I knew that if I'd been mortal still, nothing could have induced me to crawl into a passage like this. But the old vampire had been plain enough in telling me the sun could destroy me as surely as the fire. I had to get to the coffin, and I felt the fear coming back in a deluge. I got down flat on the ground and crawled as a lizard might into the passage. As I'd feared, I could not really raise my head, and there was no room to turn and reach for the hook in the stone. I had to slip my foot into the hook and crawl forward to pull the stone behind me. Total darkness, with room to rise only a few inches on my elbows. I gasped, and the fear welled, and I almost went mad thinking about the fact that I couldn't raise my head, and finally I smacked it against the stone and lay still, whimpering. But what was I to do? I must reach the coffin. So telling myself to stop this whining, I commenced to crawl faster and faster. My knees scraped the stone. My hands sought crevices and cracks to pull me along. My neck ached with the strain as I struggled not to lift my head again in panic. And when my hand suddenly felt solid stone again, I pushed upon it with all my strength. I felt it move as a pale light seeped in. I scrambled out of the passage, and found myself standing in a small room. The ceiling was low, curved, and the high window was narrow with the familiar heavy grid of iron bars. But the sweet violet light of the night poured in revealing a great fireplace cut in the firewall, the wood ready for the torch, and beside it, beneath the window, an ancient stone sarcophagus. My red velvet fur-lined cape lay over the sarcophagus, and on a rude bench I glimpsed a splendid suit of red velvet worked with gold, and much Italian lace, as well as red silk breeches and white silk hose and red-heeled slippers. I smoothed back my hair from my face and wiped the thin film of sweat from my upper lip and my forehead. It was bloody, this sweat, and when I saw this on my hands, I felt a curious excitement. And what am I thought, and what lies before me? For a long moment, I looked at this blood, and then I licked my fingers. A lovely zinging pleasure passed through me. It was a moment before I could collect myself sufficiently to approach the fireplace. I lifted 2 sticks of kindling as the old vampire had done, and rubbing them very hard and fast, saw them almost disappear as the flames shot up from them. There was no magic in this, only skill, and as the fire warmed me, I took off my soiled clothes, and with my shirt wiped every last trace of human waste away, and threw all this in the fire, before putting on the new garments. Red, dazzling red. Not even Nicholas had such clothes as these. They were clothes for the court at Versailles, with pearls and tiny rubies worked into their embroidery. The lace of the shirt was Valenciennes. Excuse me, please. Which I had seen on my mother's wedding gown. I put the wolf cape over my shoulders, and though the white chill was gone from my limbs, I felt like a creature carved from ice. My smile felt hard and glittering to me, and strangely slow as I allowed myself to feel and to see these garments. In the blaze of the fire, I looked at the coffin. The effigy of an old man was carved upon its heavy lid, and I realized immediately it was the likeness of Magnus. But here he lay in tranquillity, his gestures mouth sealed, his eyes staring mildly at the ceiling, his hair a neat mane of deeply carved waves and ringlets. 3 centuries old was this thing, surely. He lay with his hands folded on his chest, his garments long robes, and from his sword that had been carved into the stone, someone had broken out the hilt and part of the scabbard. I stared at this for an interminable length of time, seeing that it had been carefully chipped away with much effort. Was it the shape of the cross that someone had sought to remove? I traced it over with my finger. Nothing happened, of course, any more than when I'd murmured all those prayers. And squatting in the dust beside the coffin, I drew a cross there. Again, nothing. Then to the cross I added a few strokes to suggest the body of Christ, his arms, the crook of his knees, his bowed head. I wrote, "The Lord Jesus Christ," the only words I could write well, save for my own name, and again nothing. And still glancing back uneasily at the words and the little crucifix, I tried to lift the lid of the coffin. Even with this new strength, it was not easy, and no mortal man alone could have done it. But what perplexed me was the extent of my difficulty. I did not have limitless strength, and certainly I didn't have the strength of the old vampire. Maybe the strength of 3 men was what I now possessed, or the strength of 4. It was impossible to calculate. It seemed pretty damned impressive to me at the moment. I looked into the coffin, nothing but a narrow place, full of shadows where I couldn't imagine myself lying. There were Latin words inscribed around the rim, and I couldn't read them. This tormented me. I wished the words weren't there, and my longing for Magnus, my helplessness, threatened to close in on me. I hated him for leaving me, and it struck me with a full ironic force that I'd felt love for him before he'd leapt into the fire. I'd felt love for him when I saw the red garments. Do devils love each other? Do they walk arm in arm in hell, saying, "Ah, you are a friend, how I love you," things like that to each other? It was a rather detached intellectual question I was asking, as I did not believe in hell, but it was a matter of a concept of evil, wasn't it? All creatures in hell are supposed to hate one another, as all the saved hate the damned, without reservation. I'd known that all my life. It had terrified me as a child, the idea that I might go to heaven and my mother might go to hell, and that I should hate her. I couldn't hate her. And what if we were in hell together? Well, now I know, whether I believe in hell or not, that vampires can love each other, and that in being detected to evil, one does not cease to love, or that in being dedicated to evil, one does not cease to love. Or so it seemed for that brief instant, but don't start crying again. I can't abide all this crying. I turned my eyes to a large wooden chest that was partially hidden at the head of the coffin. It wasn't locked. Its rotted wooden lid fell almost off the hinges when I opened it. And though the old master had said he was leaving me his treasure, I was flabbergasted by what I saw there. The chest was crammed with gems and gold and silver. There were countless jeweled rings, diamond necklaces, ropes of pearls, plate and coins, and hundreds upon hundreds of miscellaneous valuables. I ran my fingers lightly over the heap and then held up handfuls of it, gasping as the light ignited the red of the rubies, the green of the emeralds. I saw refractions of color of which I'd never dreamed, and wealth beyond my calculation. It was the fabled Caribbean pirate's chest, the proverbial king's ransom, and it was mine now. More slowly I examined it. Scattered throughout were personal and perishable articles, satin masks rotting away from their trimming of gold, lace handkerchiefs and bits of cloth to which were fixed pins and brooches. Here was a strip of leather harness hung with gold bells, a mouldering bit of lace slipped through a ring, snuff boxes by the dozens, lockets of velvet ribbon. Had Magnus taken all this from his victims? I lifted up a jewel-encrusted sword, far too heavy for these times, and a worn slipper save perhaps for its rhinestone buckle. Of course he had taken what he wanted, yet he himself had worn rags, the tattered costume of another age, and he lived here as a hermit might have lived in some earlier century. I couldn't understand it. But there were other objects scattered about in this treasure, rosaries made up of gorgeous gems, and they still had their crucifixes. I touched the small sacred images. I shook my head and bit my lip, as if to say, how awful that he should have stolen these. But I also found it very funny, and further proof that God had no power over me. And as I was thinking about this, trying to decide if it was as fortuitous as it seemed for the moment, I lifted from the treasure an exquisite pearl-handled mirror. I looked into it almost unconsciously, as one often glances in mirrors, and there I saw myself as a man might expect, except my skin was very white, as the old fiend's had been white, and my eyes had been transformed from their usual blue to a mingling of violet and cobalt that was softly iridescent. My hair had a high luminous sheen, and when I ran my fingers back through it I felt a new and strange vitality there. In fact, this was not Lestat in the mirror after all, but some replica of him made of other substances. And the few lines time had given me by the age of 20 years were gone or greatly simplified and just a little deeper than they had been. I stared at my reflection. I became frantic to discover myself in it. I rubbed my face, even rubbed the mirror, and pressed my lips together to keep from crying. Finally, I closed my eyes and opened them again, and I smiled very gently at the creature. He smiled back. That was Lestat, all right. And there seemed nothing in his face that was in any way malevolent. Well, not very malevolent. Just the old mischief, the impulsiveness. He could have been an angel, in fact, this creature, except that when his tears did rise, they were red, and the entire image was tinted red because his vision was red. And he had these evil little teeth he could press into his lower lip when he smiled that made him look absolutely terrifying. A good enough face with one thing horribly, horribly wrong with it. But it suddenly occurred to me, I am looking at my own reflection. And hadn't it been said enough that ghosts and spirits and those who have lost their souls to hell have no reflections in mirrors? A lust to know all things about what I was came over me. A lust to know how I should walk among mortal men. I wanted to be in the streets of Paris, seeing with my new eyes all the miracles of life that I'd ever glimpsed. I wanted to see the faces of the people, to see the flowers in bloom and the butterflies, to see Nicky, to hear Nicky play his music. No. Forswear that. But there were 1,000 forms of music, wasn't there? Or weren't there? And as I closed my eyes, I could almost hear the orchestra of the opera, the arias rising in my ears. So sharp the recollection, so clear. But nothing would be ordinary now, not joy or pain or the simplest memory. All would possess the magnificent luster, even grief for the things that were forever lost. I put down the mirror, and taking one of the old yellow lace handkerchiefs from the chest, I wiped my tears. I turned and sat down softly before the fire, delicious the warmth on my face and hands. A great sweet drowsiness came over me, and as I closed my eyes again, I felt myself immersed suddenly in the strange dream of Magnus stealing the blood. A sense of enchantment returned, of dizzying pleasure. Magnus holding me, connected to me, my blood flowing into him. But I heard the chains scraping the floor of the old catacomb. I saw the defenseless vampire thing in Magnus's arms. Something more to it, something important, a meaning. About theft, treachery, about surrendering to no one but God, not demon, and never man. I thought and thought about it, half awake, half dreaming again, and the maddest thing came to me, that I would tell Nicky all about this, that as soon as I got home I would lay it all out, the dream, the possible meaning, and we would talk. With an ugly shock, I opened my eyes. The human in me looked helplessly about the chamber. He started to weep again, and the newborn fiend was too young yet to rein him in. The sobs came like hiccups, and I put my hand over my mouth. Magnus, why did you leave me? Magnus, what am I supposed to do? How do I go on? I drew up my knees and rested my head on them, and slowly my head began to clear. Well, it has been great fun pretending you will be this vampire creature, I thought, wearing these splendid clothes, running your fingers through all that glorious lucre. But you can't live as this. You can't feed on living beings. Even if you are a monster, you have a consciousness in you, natural to you. Good and evil, good and evil. You cannot live without believing, and you cannot abide the acts that tomorrow you will what? You will drink blood, won't you? The gold and the precious stones glowed like embers in the nearby chest, and beyond the bars of the window that rose against the grey clouds, the violet shimmer of the distant city. What is their blood like? Hot living blood, not monster blood. My tongue pushed at the roof of my mouth, at my fangs. Think on it, wolf killer. I rose to my feet slowly. It was as if the will made it happen rather than my body. So easy it was. And I picked up the iron key ring, which I brought with me from the outer chamber, and I went to inspect the rest of my tower. Okay. Thoughts, questions, concerns? Because I might end it soon, and don't worry, we'll get on to the gaming stream soon.
I'm gonna keep it bare with you. You should probably end it soon.
I will.
Let's start getting on my last damn nerve. You complain too much.
I mean, his life has just radically changed, arguably for the worse.
I don't. When? I don't want to fucking hear it.
Listen, I don't know the next chapter, but I can tell you right now, it'll be all woe is me, but then the next thing is ridiculous. He's like, oh, nope, ass man, here it goes.
Are you guys having fun with this so far?
Yes.
Okay.
Like,
Thank you.
Don't get me wrong, right? I like Lestat. I really like Lestat. However, this is the same man that was trying to baby trap Louis.
Well, here's the thing about that. We also go into that history in this book, and keep in mind, Louis was not being the most reliable of narrator. That's why I wanted to tackle that book last, personally. I wanted to see the contrast. I don't know, boss. It seems pretty gay to me. Hey, come on, pink guy. It's not gay. I know. These vampires are pretty gay to me.
I'm just saying.
Okay.
Louis had actually, like, protected his unit, so I trust him 100% over there.
Louis was out here peak gay, and Lestat was out here fucking going through woe is me to yo. You know what would be really hot in these streets right now? Drinking niggas, that's right.
Careful, I'm on Twitch. Careful, please. Okay, but
Drinking people sounds like a fire out here right now.
But thank you all for.
He legitimately looks at the body of Christ and goes, oh my god! And then sees the red robe be like,
I'ma look so fire. I'ma be that Parisian flame down at the boardwalk.
He really out here talking about, yo, damnation sucks, but them neck veins is juicy.
Well, we're gonna learn how juicy they are next time. I will be back again next Monday. Not Monday. Next Wednesday. I'll try to make this a weekly thing. But thank you all for coming. It was fun while it lasted. I'll see y'all then.